All right, Eric, are you ready to rock and roll?
Absolutely.
Let's do this. All right, Eric. So before we begin, why don't you just quickly introduce yourself here, what you're doing with your businesses, some of your hobbies, and then we can go from there.
All right. Yeah. So I'm Eric Sharp, currently CTO of Learn In and CTO of Book Club and co-founder of those, managing partner at the Future of Work Studios, and previous co-founder and CTO of Degreed for several years.
Awesome.
I live in Bountiful, Utah. I have a big family, 6 kids. We've
Wow.
adopted half of those. It is a lot of fun and exciting all the time. And I would say my hobbies rotate around that. I love traveling and having fun. I guess we should say in normal times with my family, and really just spending time with them.
Wow. So before we get started, I also like to ask just a random question to get things kicked off on the right foot. The one that I felt was most applicable to ask, especially knowing the circumstances of this year, was uh, your favorite quarantine activity. What is that one?
Yeah, I have to say, my wife and I were both, while we appreciate the quarantine and being socially distant, we're both kind of introverts at heart. So we took the quarantine, I think, pretty well, which
Yeah.
means gave us a good excuse to, hole up and binge watch. Is obviously kind of there. But I love to read and love to learn, so I spend quite a bit of time of that. Reading and
Awesome.
learning. Obviously, working remote, you can build anywhere. So did not have my work schedule change that much from pre-COVID
Yeah,
times.
that's awesome. I think technology has allowed a lot of people to have a lot more autonomy with their time, or they can choose a lot of what they want to do if it's better for them and their schedule, and then they can choose the alternate. I think that it's pretty cool what technology has enabled us to do as businesses and just people. But um, Eric, so I want to start off with the questions here, and I want to just jump right into Degreed for a little bit and talk about how that specifically got built. I read and listened to other podcasts about Degree and a little bit about the story. So I have a scope and general idea of how it got started. I just want to ask and fill in some of those questions that I feel like most people can really take away from and learn the processes that it actually took to build it. So the first question, why don't we just get started off with the idea of how it even came about? How did you get involved? I know that you probably weren't the one with the idea. Your co-founder was. I think his name is Blake, correct? Blake something. I'm not really remembering
Yeah,
his name right now. So
David
why
Blake.
don't
Yep.
David Blake? So why don't we just get started with how you even got involved in this idea and then went forward from there?
Yeah, so this was, I guess, back several years ago. 2012 is when I first met David Blake. I was working at MetaConnect Global, director of software and managing engineers, building a product there. David Blake approached me through a mutual contact. Both of us had a friend, and he introduced us. Thought it might be a good match, and it was absolutely David Blake's vision and idea from the beginning was massive. It was big. It was changed the world and the way it looks at education and learning. It was not a small idea, and from there, I was being a lifelong learner myself, teaching myself how to program, and coming from an interesting background of not having much and just needing to learn. It just really resonated with me, I guess. And my path from there was to join him a few months later, full time as co-founder and CTO. So early on, it
Jeez.
was building, coding in my pajamas, and then obviously it grew from there. But the vision was always try to make an impact in the world, to try to get away from just the single way to define learning or education, which right now has kind of always been the college degree. When so many people don't consider that the path that they've taken to gain skills, or it's a path that they took decades ago, but it's not a great description of what they know right now.
Yeah. So to move on from the beginning phases of the company, right? Technology has enabled us to do many things, like I said just a bit earlier. A lot of companies now in 2020 are working remote. Technology has enabled them to do that, have people anywhere in their homes. They can still run as a business, just like they would if there wasn't any pandemic going on. So for you guys, you did start out remote because he was in San Francisco. So to help people understand that want to do a remote business in the beginning, what did you guys do to set that up? It seems very simple in my mind because you have things like Google Meet that can connect employees to people, ask questions, Google Team, Microsoft Teams, they can connect any group of people in a specific area of the business. So for you and your business, what did you guys do in particular to set up such a good remote business in the beginning?
Yeah, we're fully remote, and it actually still is fully remote, even
Yeah.
pre-COVID requirements. So
Wow.
with now hundreds of people being remote, so we, early on, it was part of what we expected. Me being in Utah and David being in San Francisco, so we would early on travel. We would every couple weeks, one of us would be traveling to the other. We would just rotate back and forth. So we got FaceTime, we got. We were able to plan. As we got early team members, we did the same thing. We tried to travel and get it face to face, but we definitely leveraged, technology and tools to get get face to face virtually.
Yeah.
And I think it was actually with that we really set up a structure that allowed it to grow from there to many people. That includes things like making sure that we had strong principles in our culture and made those topics of conversation and something that people believed in, as well as the big vision. Some of that was empathy and assuming the best of what somebody's saying remotely or just in a text or chat. Those type of things set up a good pattern. As we hired and grew, then people could take the time and have flexibility in their schedule. But we overlapped in the right way to get things done, to make sure that it was transparent and clear in expectations. And then I think really everybody appreciated the big vision and pushing towards that, made people passionate about it. So we never had any problem with people
Yeah.
not being involved and people not pulling their own weight.
Did you guys have an in-house software to connect everybody, or did you use different softwares from uh, different places to kind of jumble together and make everything work?
Yeah, early days, we started out Google based. So it was Hangouts back then. I think when we were small enough, we used Google Chat. I don't know what it was. Google Hangouts was chat, whatever it was back then. We
Yeah.
moved into Slack pretty early though. So Slack has been something that now for several years we've used. And I think we've used it in both the, get business done sort of way, but we've also used it to get to know each other better and to make sure there was a personal touch and a personal involvement of getting to know each other as human beings instead of
Exactly.
just as coworkers.
So Eric, I want to talk about now the first client that the Greed got. Obviously a big milestone for any company out there that's being built. For you guys, just talk about that story of the very first client, how you even got the first client. And then from there, we can talk a little bit more about scaling from that. But just talk about the first person that you sold and then how it even happened. So,
Yeah. For Degreed, it's a little bit different. We started out direct to consumer, all about tracking your own learning and giving visibility to that. We about a year and a half in, well, probably a year in, we started building an enterprise product to revamp and get in front of really employees, which is a massive
yes.
amount of people, but also these companies wanted to revamp the way that they did learning in their companies, and so we stumbled upon that pretty quickly. I think that journey. It is, if you track our first couple of clients, I think one was, I don't know, sub 10,000 employees. And then our second one was almost 300,000 employees. So we
Wow.
moved from not having a rich kind of deep enterprise support and enterprise quality, product and company to needing to grow up really fast. So that was that, and that got done from really being innovative and leading when it came to enterprise software from a user experience perspective, and making sure that the employees really mattered, and we wanted to simplify their lives. So that's how it got started. And as we got into bigger conversations, I still remember, I mean, we had less than probably 12 of us, and we all traveled to this client to meet with the executives, and it was all of us. The early days, it was selling the dream and the vision. Fortunately, they made a bet on us, and I mean, that started a huge snowball to now hundreds of clients.
Yeah. So when you guys all went to that first client, was that something that was a connection to get that meeting, or was that a ad? How did you get that meeting in the first place?
Yeah, it's being out there because we had functioned a little while direct to consumer in learning. We had different people at these big companies always looking for what might be innovative and what might really help them. And so we had an early team member of this client specifically come across us and then get connected with us. We were really fortunate that it was a massive company, bureaucratic in a lot of ways, but with these innovative teams that were looking for what could really help the organization, not just keep up with red tape, but actually push things forward for their employees and their culture.
Yeah. So a couple more questions about the Greed. When you did start, you said you were B2C before you made any enterprise software. So kind of the same question that I just asked, but just with the consumer side in the very beginning. How did you even get the first couple of people or the software out there to be used? Was that some marketing tactic that you used through social media channels, or how exactly did you get that out in the first place when you had that MVP or product ready to go?
Yeah, I give a lot of credit to David Blake and what he did. Early days. I mean, he was bootstrapping. He'd previously led marketing, and so he had an idea of how to approach that. There were multiple conferences he attended early on at the Greed with a cardboard sign around his neck saying education is broken, someone should do something. And then we ran an early campaign as well of just getting that out, and we got a really good following of people that were excited and realized that change was needed. So we had plenty of people send in pictures of themselves with that saying. One even sent it in with it written across his college diploma. So we gathered quite a few this early following, and then it grew from there on the consumer side, especially to those autodidacts that were focused on learning whenever they could and tracking that and getting an idea of how they went about building skills. So that was our early crowd, and that was really fortunate. We also got into giving scholarships and trying to help people along their way to build skills and build their education. And those were all pretty critical in those early days to get that following. And it led us and set us up to really, I mean, even as we built a B2B, we kept the B2C live, and it's still out there, making hopefully our vision come to pass.
That's awesome. So Eric, the next question, you can definitely take a pass on this one if you don't feel comfortable answering, but I just wanted to see and understand how the business made money in the beginning. Was it a subscription software? How specifically was it profitable in the beginning and then growing from that?
Yeah, as the B2C days, I will say direct to consumer was tricky to monetize. We were very fortunate in having good angel investors, and then up to as we got to our Series A and having support from awesome investors as we built the enterprise product. Those early days, that's how we functioned. That's how we got to build the platform and got it ready until we hit that revenue from enterprise clients. So before that, we didn't have that the monetization nailed down, the business model. That was a lot of the early pivoting and iterating, and fortunately in the enterprise is where we found a sweet spot, which kind of like typical SaaS companies and startups, it's generally by seat, and there's but you shoot for longer term contracts for a,
Yeah.
1 to 5 year type of contract with an enterprise, so you can get some support and longevity, and as well as investing in them specifically, because they have a lot of requirements,
Yeah.
as big companies do.
Yeah. It seems like there's definitely more of a process with enterprise than just one single consumer. But, you think of the enterprise, you just think of bigger deals, and they work out for the longer term. Like you said, obviously longer contracts. But so Eric, to move on from Degreed, I want to work into what you are doing now currently. Just to describe a little bit to the people that are listening, Book Club and Learn In are the two companies that Eric is now spending most of his time on. And so to start off this story here, just talk about how you decided to jump into these two companies. What made you do it? And then did you see something, experience something that made you feel like this was a need for people that needed to be filled? Just talk about that early phase for us so we can understand what you were thinking when you started.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. What were we thinking? I think there's doing something like this, especially it's not standard. I mean, building one startup, Degreed for several years, was difficult. I mean, it was hard, and it paid off in great ways. But yeah, that difficult part, why would we want to double that? I think
Exactly.
the answer comes into both David and I over the last couple of years stepped away from Degree to do other things, or take a break for a little bit. That was kind of the catalyst to us just talking and keeping up to speed. As we got into early this year is when we decided to pull the trigger and start up the Future of Work Studios, which is meant to be kind of this overarching company where we can invest, advise, as well as build and operate startups. It's all oriented towards the future of work and learning. So what that means is that we wanted to have, again, that bigger impact in the world when it comes to learning, education, skill building, both from advising and investing, but also in this operating phase. So Learn In and Book Club both, started from that initial guide. David and I have spent a lot of time digging into that and finding places where it made sense, where there was a need that we needed to change. And one, Learn In is focused on the enterprise, similar as a kind of cousin to Degreed, but focused on partnering with amazing boot camp programs, certificate programs, even degree programs, and then giving access to companies and their employees to use those. But the key, and I think this is where it gets unique, is that it's focused on trying to make tuition assistance, which has been archaic and as a benefit for the most part, now to actually make it legit and make it strategic for a company. So we allow companies to say, we know that in a year or two, we're going to need the 20 data scientists. But instead of going out and trying to recruit from the external job market, right, those that are perfect there, let's try to promote from within and give them skills. So let's not only support them from tuition reimbursement, but let's give them other scholarships and time on the job, things that will actually support the employee through that journey, versus just giving them a benefit check reimbursement, but you don't talk to them the rest of the time while the employee is working nights and weekends trying to make that work, right? It's their own time. So it's bringing that together and aligning the priority. Again, it's a critical need that we saw as we went through the journey at Degreed. So we're coming in there. And then the other is, it's on that consumer side. So Book Club is focused on bringing to light one of the biggest groups of experts we have in the world, right?
Yeah.
The number one way that people learn is books. And which implies that the number one group of experts we have in the world are authors. And yet the interaction between authors and readers is slim to none. It's through book launches, maybe through a personal website, maybe social media, but for the most part, it's the book themselves, right? So now we're bringing Book Club is meant to reimagine book clubs, to actually bring the author either live or on demand into your own book clubs and book groups that you have with friends, all the way to larger, enterprise or bigger book clubs that again, we want to fuse the authors with their expertise and the hidden gems of research and bringing a book to life to the readers that can actually, I don't remember the days. We all remember the days where we've read a book and it changed our lives. So now we're
Exactly.
capitalizing on that and saying we should bring the authors then. We should bring them in and let them have that impact and really let the learning happen at that level with others and with the author. So again, learning focused, but it's direct to consumer. And
Yes.
we're building both, I guess, right now in this time of COVID.
Wow, what an awesome task. I mean, it's perfect for this time when everybody is out there kind of doing really not too much, I guess. They have more free time than they thought. And I think with what you're saying, it's something that people will really love to engage in. I mean, for me, I'm pretty convinced that I want to be involved in both of those things that you are just describing and building. So, but Eric, what I want to describe is describe for the people here that are listening before we hop into how you're going about building these companies is just your time management, because obviously people hear running two startups, they hear I'm working 18-hour days every single day, 7 days a week, you know. So for you, how is time management for yourself with a family as well, and then two startups as of now? What do you do? Is there anything strategic that you do, or what would you say to, you know, these newer entrepreneurs on how to manage time?
That's a great question. I think I have to dip into being a parent of six kids. I think
Oh,
helps
of
with
course.
understanding time management. I think you realize that there's not a constant demand from everyone all at the same time. Sometimes that happens, but you do try to stay sensitive to the most important parts, the constraints in the process. I think with both Learning and Book Club, early on, especially where we didn't have a team, and I was building both. I'm really fortunate. I think David Blake and I, as we even at Degreed, family was such a big emphasis of having flexibility and being able to realize that our lives are more about our family, more about that than it is about just our work. So we kept that balance and have believed in that and supported it from the early days. As we go through building these companies, I will say, I mean, David from the get-go had a chief of staff who's joined us and helps in the CEO role across both companies. I have, now I don't have a chief of staff. I have an executive assistant that's helping me keep everything in line. But I'm happy to say, as we build the early team, we've got fantastic engineers as well as product leaders that are pushing forward, and I'm able to help kind of in the unique way of bridging, you know, startup technology and business together. So it becomes a little bit more strategic, less of me producing the lines of code, even though I'm there every day in the lines of code somewhere. It's setting it up to delegate it and then hire an early team that believes in the vision and can push forward, you know, based on our principles to what that vision is and how we want to pull it off. I will say, I mean, there's definitely long days in there, so it's a lot of pushing, but I also feel similar to early Degreed of just pushing. A lot of it's the choice we make to push forward this hard, you know, big vision that's really difficult. It's less of, so it's more the pressure we put on ourselves to make that commitment. And I found there's actually a lot of joy that comes in that, of producing something from nothing, having it be valuable and mean something to many individuals. So that's a huge payoff that I still try to maintain balance and keep my pulse to both family and the businesses to make sure that there's no roadblocks and that we move things forward.
Exactly. Yeah. You know, hard work is very fruitful. It's very, very fruitful. So, but that's one thing that I feel like I needed to ask, because a lot of people that are new to the game of business have such a hard time just managing what should go where in their schedule, or how they should delegate their time, even how much time they should spend on something. Because, you know, you can spend a lot of time on a task that will get you nowhere, and that is not considered hard work. I would say it's just kind of dead work, not something that doesn't really work out for yourself in the end. So,
Yeah,
um,
we actually early on. I mean, we have. I think there's some great sources out there when you talk about activities versus outcomes. I think
yeah,
that's critical for any startup entrepreneur is to understand the difference and understand
yeah,
that activities don't equal outcomes, and you need to have them structured inside of what is the outcome versus just get in the habit of doing something every day for no reason. You just don't have the
exactly.
luxury to do that, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Your priorities definitely need to be set straight in a startup, I feel like, with what you put your time to, for sure. If you want to see fast growth, then that's for sure something you need to think of. Eric, I want to move to book club in particular with just the very first couple of steps of how you started building that. What did you do to start growing book club with either the technology? What were you doing just to get that set up for success?
Yeah, on the technology side, I will say so much happens on the product and trying to make sure that what you're doing is the right thing. I think there's discovery, there's
Yeah.
so much of talking to people, getting a sense for what the real pain is that you're solving, and then matching that with the vision. I think the best startups, the best success stories are the ones that marry the two. They don't necessarily say that everybody we talk to, that's the product we're going to build,
Yeah.
because a lot of times there's not enough innovation in just doing that to create the value. So there was absolutely a lot of discussion and a lot of working around to authors as well as readers in that discovery phase. As I focus on technology, I like in a startup you never know what the timeline will look like. So I believe that, and I've talked to many engineers that maybe spend too much time in creating the perfectly engineered and architected product,
Oh my gosh, yes.
right? You probably heard this or talked to engineers that are like,
Oh
oh, it looks
yes.
so perfect, and that is. I like to think of it in a startup that is just a huge red flag. If anybody is talking that way out there, some advice, just you got to dig to the bottom of that to make sure that there's a good balance. So I like making sure that I understand the requirements, what's the value to the user that we're trying to produce, and then you build it, but you plan for like the next few months, not the next few years in building it. And
Yeah.
it puts you in I like to say you're building vertical slices across a cake instead of the layer cake. In a startup, if you build the most amazing data storage layer, and then you spent so much time on it that the company dies, you never really got value out to the users. So
100%.
building in those slices is critical. And that's what we did early at book club. The focus was identifying what is the biggest, maybe actually time sensitive or time pertinent value. And in the times of COVID, it was trying to focus on how do we join authors with readers that are there in a live, a live setting. So now
Exactly.
we're, on the cusp of that, connecting the two and letting authors join with their audience live in a book club supported way. And that's really that process early on was that and weighing the balance between the value and then the perfect architecture. And I think so far we've struck a good balance there. And as we've hired the team, I think they all take that same kind of direction and calling with them as they build.
Yeah, 100%. Eric, so I just had a question, but I totally forgot it. I'll ask this though. With the authors, when you were getting those authors to obviously come into these groups to help out people that are reading their books, what was the process like to have these people go from their busy schedules, their priorities, to get them to take some of their time or whatever that might be that you're asking of them, just to obviously join you in this journey in this company to help people get more from their thoughts, their words? What did that look like? Did you have a strategy there that made a certain percentage come and help you guys out, or what did that look like in particular, that persuasive nature of saying, hey, look, this is my idea, this is how awesome it's going to be, and we need all of you guys that are similar to help us with this idea? So for you, what did that look like?
Yeah, I think similar to the enterprise sales I talked about with Decreed, I think there's the best strategy to getting commitments like that is having a strong vision and being able to share that and be able to structure that and pitch that. I think book club is the same thing. I think if we were trying to just shoot for authors joining, individuals or trying to get there to talk to them about anything, I think it might be a struggle. It might be a struggle to get commitments. I think as we approach it with the bigger vision in mind of saying you're an expert in this area, fiction, nonfiction, doesn't matter. This is where you put a lot of time to get there. And that is something your readers want to know and they want to understand. So that became a good motivation. And I think the one thing that we found is we've talked to all types of authors, the self-published to the, amazing bestseller authors, is that desire to help, that desire to teach. I think there's no question that they're passionate about what they're doing. And we find that is, if we can help them deliver that, if we can help them get the connection to be in a spot to share and to share that knowledge, I think they all just really lean into that commitment. And that's fortunate so far. I mean, we are it's a long road, and we know that there's a lot ahead of us, and there's a lot of authors. So we continue to keep having discussions and trying to set up better ways for them to connect with readers and set up a platform that nurtures those conversations and those discussions.
Yeah. That's awesome. Eric, so let's work our way into Learn In. I want to talk a little bit about the early phases of this, just like we did with Book Club. So why don't we just get started off? I'm curious in knowing how you went about actually starting this one as well. I think that it's somewhat similar to Book Club, obviously, but tell us about some of the differences that you saw from Learn In to Book Club, perhaps, and then just how you basically started this on the journey that it's on now. So
yeah, it's a great question. I think both started around February. I mean, as we got up and going late January, we pushed. I think Learn In was similar to Degreed in a lot of ways. So it made some of it clearer to jump on and dig into discovery and get in the right spot with these enterprise contacts and clients that we have from our years at Degreed. And then I think that facilitated. We raised a pre-seed round with Learn In, and I think announced it in April, where book clubs came in, I think we announced in September. But so that kind of models a little bit of the process as we moved forward, where Learn In, I think, started faster to build a team and build out the product. Book club, there is I think a lot of discovery and a lot of conversations and pivoting into the right spot to get there to where we are now. And Learn In the early days, I think it was that wealth of contacts and a lot of the respect that we achieved building Degreed. I think David is well known in enterprise learning and enterprise talent, and becomes a great contact to get to the different pieces of an organization and talk to them. So early on, as we built Learn In, Taylor, our head of product, spent a lot of time, I think over the course of 2 or 3 months, like 140, 160 conversations oriented towards just this idea, and getting, he crushed it. And the feedback we got from that was just amazing. And it solidified everything we were assuming. It, solidified what we thought the market needed. And now it's the process of building, right? Building and selling, and then the longer enterprise sales cycle. But that's really how we got into that. I will say, Learn In is like the idea, came last year as we looked at just the crushing student debt, the crushing, collegiate setup that everybody expects and is used to, but also bringing that into the enterprise and seeing so many, and I did this as well, the struggle of working full-time, trying to go to school, graduate with a degree while working full-time. It is just not fun. There's nobody that would say it's fun. Everybody had the same problem. And that is where Learn In, started, was to ease that burden, try to bring the stuff that the company values as far as building skills and closing their skill gap to the things that the employees are using that for, which you just bring those together in alignment. And that's yeah, that's where it started. And it was so nice to get so much validation in the discovery
Yes.
process and building it up to this point.
So Eric, going back to what you said just previously, you were talking about validation, how David Blake had talked to like 200 plus people on the idea and they gave great feedback. I think that that is something that is so it's malnourished, if that's the right word to use, you know, in the entrepreneurship game for people that are new. If you know of Josh Little, I actually interviewed him. He's just a serial entrepreneur who has a process of weeding out bad ideas and validating ideas that are actually good to pursue. He runs these ideas through documents of questions they have to pass. And I think that it's just an amazing thing to really paint the picture of how important validation is before you spend any time or money. And so getting that point over is what I want people to really understand. And it sounds like you obviously and your co-founder knew exactly what you were doing. Just something that newer entrepreneurs need to focus on, I feel like, a lot more. And so on that note, going back again to what you were saying, the investors obviously helped you out in the beginning phase. Some of your advice here is what I'd want. What should a newer person to the game of entrepreneurship do to build those connections to investors to obviously get the money that they might need, or just the connections that they might need in the end? What would you say to them to do if they have zero to start with, no leads? What would you tell them to do in the beginning to meet these types of people, meet investors, meet other business people? What would you tell them to do?
Yeah, it's a great question. I have to say I'm really fortunate in that David Blake is like the expert when it comes to this. Everything I've learned there, I've learned from him, observing
That's
him over the
awesome.
years. But there's no question. Like when you're starting from zero, I think it's probably closely tied to just the previous point of discovery and questions. You can't assume that you're going to get everything perfect your very first time without talking to
Yeah.
anybody, either users or clients or investors. You just can't. You can't assume that's the way it works. So going through a deliberate process to both highlight what are the questions I need to ask, what is the feedback that I need to get is important. But the other thing that I learned from David was literally spending years in cultivating contacts. So it's cultivating, knowing. Degreed was ed tech, and this David always knew he'd end up in ed tech, so he nurtured and grew different relationships over time. Maybe it's one sit down lunch a year or something with a potential investor to keep them up to speed and keep them up to date, but also tap their brain. And then even as we launched Degreed and got out there with investors, that was it played a critical role because you didn't have a list of 30 potential investors that were all cold. You had a list of 90% of that was warm contacts that you had talked to in the last 6 months, and they'd heard from you and knew what was going on, and it became a lot easier. So I think one of the first pieces of advice would be you've got to start having discussions, and you've got to start cultivating that. I'm not in sales, but doing a cold sale is really difficult. So you want to warm it up as much as you can, and that means getting to know them as people, letting them know you as a founder, and what your principles are, and what you trust in, and how you really view the world and the problem that you're facing. That's critical, I think, to lead up to the point where you're securing angel investment or securing a Series A, or like Learn In and Book Club, these pre-seed rounds. We were very fortunate to have shared investors from Degreed in both of them, which has been pretty amazing that we've got that relationship over the long term to get to that point with these new ventures. It is just a huge credit, to David, to maintaining that and building that side of this.
Yeah. I think that one question is all it really starts with, is in a discussion, asking that on LinkedIn, literally in person at a conference. Just one question starts that. And then from there, it's so easy to leverage connections after that. And so it just starts with one question. In my mind, do you think that it would just start with one question if someone is starting with person one in business? It just starts with one question. Do you agree?
Absolutely. And I would add to that that the one question, and I will frame the one question, but it would be about them versus what you're doing.
Yes.
That's kind of
Yes.
my take and my perspective. But yes, absolutely. You've got to start somewhere. I think the big part is taking that step. Don't leave it bottled up and think that you're going to have some big unveil to friends, investors, family, like clients, and then it just, that's what you assume happens, but that's not the way it really works in the world.
Exactly. Yep. So Eric, as we close up here, I want to ask you just one last question. That's a general question to anyone new in this space. Uh, it's very broad, but it goes like this: what would you say to some new business person coming to you? Say tomorrow you're working wherever you're working, and they say, Eric, what's the one attribute that I need to learn to be successful as an entrepreneur? And then what would you say to that person?
Whew, one attribute.
It's definitely a toughie for sure.
Yeah. It's just difficult picking one. I think there's kind of two sides to this. I think being teachable, learning. Like I'm a big learner. Obviously, all these companies are oriented towards learning. Learning is a
Yes.
lifelong thing. You've never made it, and that is especially true in starting up a company. But you also have to marry that to um, big vision persistence, I guess I would say. You've got to weather the hard times, and learning doesn't necessarily mean that you're taking the advice of every single person you meet, because you have a vision, and once you have that, that rings true, and so you got to hang on to that. So it's this weird balance between the two of being teachable, but also knowing what you're all about and what why you're doing this. Don't be too easily discard that, because that's critical. I think it's critical for investors. I think it's critical for clients, and it's especially critical in success as you grow a startup.
Yeah. You know, I don't know where I actually started asking that question, but I realized as I kept asking it that it gets down to the core beliefs of how they're managing their business side of their personality and their work. Like it's just, it really gets down deep and exposes exactly how they're thinking. Learning, being someone that loves to learn, I think is one of the most important though, because you can do anything if you put your mind to it, I believe. And if you're willing to learn, then you can do anything that you want. You can code, you can invent the coolest thing there ever was out there. So I think that the stuff that you said is very, very, very useful for someone to at least acknowledge. So Eric, as
I know that we're short on time, but I got to say, like my learning background, and this is, I think, especially important to people listening and just looking at where they came from. I came from very little. I came from a mobile home in the middle of nowhere, no
wow.
running water part of the time. Like there was no reason that I should have grown out of that, or moved anywhere, or done anything, or be any success. And the one thing that made that difference was learning and learning and learning and learning, and step by step was just one thing after the other. So just
Exactly.
saying, like do that, apply it over and over again, and it makes a difference in weeks, months, and obviously decades. I think you just stick with it, keep learning and growing, and it's a
Exactly.
pretty amazing journey.
Exactly. Eric is the number one example of learning is a successful attribute right there. I promise. It's such a useful thing for anybody. So Eric, as we close, why don't you just shoot out links where we can find you, you and your companies or whatever you want us to go to, and then we can say goodbye.
Perfect. Okay. So you can, I mean, all of these will be on the different websites, so you can check it out. The Future of Work Studios is TFOW.com. LearnIn is learnin.com. And then Book Club, which is bookclub.com. And you'll find me on all three. And feel free as well, social media, Eric G. Sharp, obviously LinkedIn and Twitter, and et cetera. So looking forward
Awesome.
to it. I'm always happy to answer questions and try to help entrepreneurs in the journey. So don't be shy.
Awesome. Great resource, guys. Eric Sharp here. I just want to thank you so much, Eric, for coming out. It was a pleasure meeting you. I'm so glad that we could finally make it happen, like I said before. So I just want to thank you again. It was a pleasure, man.
Thanks, Josh. I appreciate it.
Thank you.